The world has an SUV problem. The bulky vehicles take up space in packed cities, are dangerous to cyclists and pedestrians, and cause more pollution than a normal car. And they're taking over the world. In 2021, a record 45% of global car sales were SUVs, up from 35% in 2019. The extent of the problem is made clear in this graphic from the International Energy Agency and The Guardian. As you can see, between 2010 and 2018, SUVs were the second largest contributor to increased global carbon emissions, well ahead of heavy industry, trucks, and even aviation. Indeed, when it comes to total carbon emissions, if SUV drivers were a nation, they would rank 7th in the world. All of this makes the actions of tyre extinguishers seem fairly reasonable. The group have taken direct action in the posher parts of the city by deflating the tyres of around 100 SUVs in a single night. They do so by putting a lentil in the air valves of SUV tyres, so no long-term damage caused. A spokesperson for the group explained their action. Politicians talk, we act. We will defend ourselves from air pollution, climate change, and unsafe roads, and we urge others to join us. Edinburgh is a small city with good public transport. Nobody living in the centre of town needs to own one of these death machines. The tyre extinguishers action was the topic of a debate on BBC's Politics Live. It involved Conservative commentator Isabel Oakeshott, Labour MP Barry Gardiner, Tory peer Ed Vaizey, and George Monbiot, who found himself outnumbered.
Is this justifiable, Ed?
Well, no, I don't think it is. I mean, I think people gluing themselves to the road and deciding that they are going to be our spokesman on climate change and therefore have permission to interfere and mess up our lives in any way they see fit is unacceptable.
Yeah, but if you guys were doing your job, none of this would be necessary.
Well, vote for somebody else then. Don't let down people's tyres.
Here we are in the midst... Yeah, I do, actually. Here we are in the midst of a climate emergency.
Oh, come on,
you guys...
George.
What, you're saying it's not a climate emergency?
Of course there's a climate emergency, but
are you saying that's justifiable?
You're saying that
No,
just spouting the word climate emergency doesn't give you permission to vandalise people's cars or glue yourself to the pavement.
You don't even let me finish my sentence.
I know, that's because you're talking nonsense.
You don't even know what I'm talking because I haven't said it yet.
Well, say it quick.
In the midst of a climate emergency, you guys are messing about, dragging us all into this ridiculous drama in Downing Street and not doing the job which needs to be done. So what do we see? We look around us and see, oh my God, these people are trashing our life support systems with their SUVs and lots of other profoundly antisocial habits. So yeah, I'm in favour of it because I think actually if you guys aren't going to regulate it, who's going to step in instead?
You're in favour of tyre letting down, just to be clear. You literally are.
I am literally in favour.
Wow.
That might
I'm
let
in
you
favour.
Down. You've let me down. You let the whole school down.
Oh, right. Well, hang on.
I'm in favour of much cheaper electric cars. I'd love an electric car.
But not letting people's tyres down.
I've already had the front of my car taken off by vandals, the VW sign, so, you know.
Justifiable or not?
I think it's criminal damage, but I think there is a place for protest that disrupts lives. And
including letting down people's
No,
that's...
I said
you
that,
said that's criminal damage,
because I think you have to target your message to people who are going to be able to do something about it. And actually, the SUV drivers or owners of those cars are probably not the people who are going to be making the legislation.
OK, let's get some perspective here. SUVs not only are massively more damaging in terms of pollution and in terms of climate breakdown, shortening the lives of very many people. They're also far more dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists because they're so big and heavy. If you get hit by one, you're more likely to be killed.
I'm not advocating SUVs.
OK, but
I agree with you about SUVs.
By contrast to the extraordinary imposition they are making on us, letting down a few tyres is actually a very small imposition on them.
100, actually,
George,
this morning.
I think you should withdraw your support for letting down tyres. I think that's really irresponsible for you to sit here on TV and say it's OK for people to take that type of direct action.
It's okay.
Wow.
All right, well, but he's not going to retract it.
He's not going to retract it. Ash, it was all giving Don't Look Up. What did you think of that debate?
The pearls could not be clutched hard enough. You're telling me that someone's in favour of letting down tyres? All of those millions of innocent tyres. Wow. It's like the domino effect, but it starts with a lentil, you know? And then where are we? Full societal breakdown. I think what this shows you is that people say an awful lot of things that they don't even believe, right? Or it's somewhere in between a performance and a sincere belief. People talk themselves into these positions of going, oh my God, I'm so shocked. Oh my God, a tire. Isabel Oakeshott is, quite frankly, one of the nastiest people in politics. I've had encounters with her personally where I'd asked Richard Tice, who was at the time the chairman of the Brexit Party. I asked him about some of his tax arrangements, and she cornered me afterwards, and she was like, what the fuck was all that about? You know, getting really, really nasty and in my face. And so the fact that she's now going, well, I think you should really retract that. I think you should take that back because I think it's really, really just beyond the pale. It's total bollocks. The reason why they're trying to make George out to be holding some kind of totally out there position, it's nasty, it's borderline violent, it's borderline incitement, is because they can't defend the case of having an SUV. An SUV is a death machine, right? It is the most polluting form of car that you can have. It's a really inefficient use of carbon as well because it takes so much carbon to make. So even if you're carpooling and you're stuffing every seat to the gills for every journey you take, it is still a less efficient use of carbon than any other kind of car. It's twice as likely to kill you as any other kind of vehicle, and is much more likely to kill children because they're so high up. And unlike other forms of car, you can't solve these problems simply by going electric. And in fact, that makes some of these problems worse, because if you stick an electric battery, which is heavier than a conventional engine, if you stick that in an SUV, it makes it heavier and therefore more likely to kill a pedestrian or a cyclist in a collision. These things are wholly opposed to human flourishing, dignity, and safety of everybody. But why do we have them? It was a way to popularize military vehicles in the United States. It was an injection of life into the automobile industry. They've had a huge amount of money in terms of marketing, advertising plowed behind them, and they're seen as aspirational. Now, none of those things, none of these desires for the SUV and to feel kind of cool when you're driving up high, none of them outweigh the social and physical harms that SUVs produce. And the minute you start thinking in that way, then you go, well, hang on, either governments legislate and the government isn't legislating, or there is actually grounds for direct action and to take matters into our own hands. Now, if you are letting down tires, it is the definition of a victimless crime, okay? The only victim is the fucking SUV, and it's not a thing with feelings. You're targeting the rich because, particularly in London, car ownership is associated with having higher income, particularly if you own 2 or more cars. And SUVs are concentrated in the wealthiest boroughs. In Kensington and Chelsea, 1 in 10 SUVs that's sold, I think, is in Kensington and Chelsea. I will have to double check that stat. Very sorry about that. But it's concentrated in much richer areas. So it's a victimless crime, it's targeting the rich, and that's why all of these numpties on the panel absolutely can't abide it. It's a way of stopping people from thinking their way through the problem.
I suppose the victim of the crime would be not the tyre, but the person who can't drive to work that morning. But if you can afford an SUV, you can afford an Uber. That's why it was so silly, like Isabel Oakeshott, like clutching her pearls. Oh, I'd get an electric car if they were affordable. You know what's more affordable than an SUV? A normal car. Right? You can't have sort of like this value-based argument. Value is in the sense of, I could only afford an SUV. I could only afford an SUV is not a sentence that makes sense, Isabel Oakeshott. Let's go to an aside, because we've done some digging. Besides being a Tory peer, Ed Vaizey is also cultural editor for the country set lifestyle rag Country and Townhouse, where they happen to run big spreads like this. This is from their December 2021 issue. They also had this lucrative partnered multi-page spread, and it just goes on and on and on. Now, we don't have enough detail to say Vaizey is defending SUVs due to his financial interest because he works for this magazine that gets money from the SUV sector. But I do think it is notable how when people say, I support the cause but not the method. Yes, I think it's a valiant cause, but I don't think you should take direct action. When you actually look into the choices they make in the rest of their life, it suggests they don't actually support the cause. They don't value the method. And they don't value the cause in the first place, which is why they so vociferously oppose the method. Ash, I want to get your thoughts on this, do you think that Vasey has potentially asked his editor to consider greener sponsors for his magazine? Do you think he has put his money where his mouth is?
I don't know. He doesn't seem to me to be somebody who's particularly thought that much about anything. I remember running into him once at Radio 4, and he was like, "Who do you work for?" And I was like, "Oh, Novara Media." And he was like, "Oh, there's like Breitbart, isn't it?" And then kind of ran off. He doesn't strike me as a particularly thoughtful or intelligent man. And I think that he's somebody who's just knee-jerk in favour of protecting property rights and protecting SUV rights because he's a conservative, and he thinks that the idea that your personal consumption habits should be dictated by anything so lowly as regard for public health and public safety. I think he just ideologically balks at that.
All of us here at Novara Media are working harder than ever to keep scrutinising establishment politicians and the media barons who protect them. We don't have billionaire funders. We don't have advertising partnerships. We're funded entirely by you. If you've ever thought about supporting us, now's the time to go to novaramedia.com/support and donate anything you can from just £1 per month. Defy the corporate media, join our monthly supporters and help build our supporter base to 10,000 strong.